You'll never be a man. My mother said those words to me constantly, repeating them for years, her gaze filled with contempt for her only son. She couldn't have known that 10 years later, she would see me in a military uniform with the Distinguished Service Cross pinned to my chest, earned for operations in the Middle East. But by then, it was too late to ask for forgiveness. This is the story of how a weak boy, tormented by his own mother, transformed into a man who saved hundreds of lives. It's the story of the cost of becoming a true man, and how sometimes the cruelest wounds are inflicted not by enemies, but by the people closest to you. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 34 years old and have been serving in special operations for 12 years now. But to understand how I ended up here, I have to go back to the past, to that small, rundown house on the outskirts of Raleigh, North Carolina, where I spent my childhood. My father died when I was 3. A tragic accident involving a forklift at the factory. My mother was left alone with a child, no college degree, no marketable skills, and only a small survivor's pension. She took a job cleaning schools, working 2 shifts just to make ends meet. We were always short on money. Perhaps it was the constant poverty that made her so harsh, or maybe it was just her nature. But all I remember from my earliest childhood were the shouts, the constant reproaches, and comparisons that always put me down. Look at Jake from down the street. He helps his mother, and all you know how to do is eat. Your father was a real man. Who did you take after? Your hands are useless, you blockhead. I was 6 when I tried to help her fix a wobbly kitchen stool. The hammer slipped out of my hands and hit my finger. I cried out in pain. My mother looked at me with such disgust, as if I had committed a crime. Stop sniffling. You're not a man. You're a doormat. You'll never amount to anything worthwhile. I never forgot those words. They burrowed into my soul, deeper than any physical injury. From that day on, I tried not to cry in front of my mother, even when I was in serious pain or afraid. But this didn't soften her. On the contrary, she found new reasons for criticism. My schoolwork was decent. I earned A's and B's. I didn't have many friends. I grew up a quiet, reserved child. After school, I hurried home, finished my homework, and cooked dinner. My mother returned late, exhausted and angry. If she didn't like the dinner, she might toss the plate into the trash. You can't even cook a proper meal. You're a useless person, Ethan. The neighbors heard her yelling, but no one intervened. In the 90s, everyone had their own problems. Domestic disputes were considered private, and my mother never physically abused me. She only destroyed me with words. There were no bruises, so Child Protective Services never took an interest in our family. When I turned 14, I started working odd jobs, unloading trucks at the local market, mopping floors at a grocery store, putting up flyers. I brought the money home and gave it to my mother. She took it silently, without a word of thanks, acting as if I had been obligated to support her since birth. At least you're finally doing something useful, she'd say, and stash the dollars in an old tin can in the kitchen. At 15, I got into my first real fight. 3 older guys from another neighborhood cornered me near school and demanded money. I refused. One of them punched me in the face. Something inside me snapped. All the years of bottled-up fury exploded. I fought like an animal, not feeling the pain, not thinking about the consequences. When it was over, 2 of the attackers were on the ground. The 3rd had run away. My lip was split, and my nose was broken, but I had won. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could defend myself, that I wasn't helpless. The feeling was intoxicating. I came home covered in blood. My mother looked at me and sneered. Finally got into a fight like a man. I thought you were a complete coward. Though, I bet they just beat you up, and you barely fought back. I said nothing. There was no point in telling her the truth. She wouldn't have believed it anyway. From that day, I started to change. I signed up for boxing at the community gym. The trainer, Coach Frank Ramirez, was a former military man who had served in Vietnam and the First Gulf War. He immediately saw something special in me. "You've got fire in you, kid," he said after the first practice. "But that anger has to be channeled correctly, or it'll eat you alive." I trained every day for 2 hours after school. I hit the heavy bag, practiced my strikes, and sparred with older guys. I got punched in the face, fell, got up, and kept going. The physical pain muted the pain in my soul. My muscles grew. My body became stronger and tougher. My character changed along with my body. After 6 months of training, I was no longer that skinny, shy boy. My shoulders were back, my posture was straight, and my eyes held a new confidence. My mother noticed the changes, but she commented in her own way. "You put on muscle. You think that makes you a man. Men aren't defined by muscles. They're defined by their brain and responsibility. And you've always been short on brains." I learned to not react to her words, letting them pass right through me, just as Coach Frank had taught me. "Other people's opinions, even your mother's, should not define your life," he said. "You decide who you're going to be." At 16, I dropped out of high school. I had enough credits to pass the exams and get my diploma through an early exit program, but I couldn't stand sitting in a classroom anymore. I got a full-time job loading inventory at a warehouse. The pay was small, but stable. I gave half of it to my mother for groceries and utilities, and saved the rest. My goal was simple: save up enough money to leave home the moment I turned 18. Find a rented room, live alone, and never hear her condescending voice again. 2 more years of patience, and everything would change. But life had other plans. In December 2001, the war on terror was raging. Every day, the TV showed reports from the front lines in Afghanistan. I watched and felt something stirring inside me. These soldiers, going into battle, protecting their country, risking their lives, they were real men. Coach Frank noticed my intense focus on the news. "Thinking about enlisting?" he asked after practice. "I am," I replied honestly. "I want to prove I'm not a doormat, like my mother says." Coach Frank paused, then placed a hand on my shoulder. "Ethan, you don't join the army to prove something to someone else. You join to serve your country. If your motivation is to prove something to your mother, you'll break at the first sign of real hardship." "I won't break," I said firmly. "I want to serve. I want to be useful. I want to protect people." Coach Frank nodded. "Then prepare seriously. The army is not a game. They will truly test your limits there. Your physical conditioning is good, but it's not enough. You need an iron will and the readiness to sacrifice yourself for your comrades." For the next 18 months, I trained with double the intensity. Long-distance running, pull-ups, push-ups, swimming. I read books on military history, on great commanders, and on the feats of American soldiers. I prepared myself mentally and physically. My mother found out about my plans by accident. I was filling out paperwork for the selective service. She saw the forms on the table. "Going into the military?" she asked with a sneer. "You think they'll turn you into a soldier? They break weaklings like you in a week. You'll either come back a failure or not at all. Why do you need this?" "I want to serve my country," I answered, looking her in the eye. "I want to be a man, like Dad." She chuckled. "Your father was a fool. He died because of his carelessness. And you're just as foolish. Go, if you've decided. Just don't expect me to worry or write letters." "I don't expect anything," I said, and went back to filling out the documents. On my 18th birthday, I walked into the recruitment center and passed the physical with no trouble. Category A, fit for military service. The officer there looked at my physical stats and asked, "Want to try for special forces? With your numbers, you'll get selected." My heart pounded faster. Special forces, elite troops, the best of the best. "I do," I replied, without hesitation. Then get ready, the officer said. The selection process is brutal. Maybe 1 out of 10 candidates makes it, but it's worth a shot. A month later, I received my notice. Basic training began in April. I had 2 months for final preparations. I worked at the warehouse during the day, trained every evening, and slept only 5 hours a night. My body adapted, growing tougher and more resilient. The evening before I left, my mother was silent the whole time. I packed my belongings into an old military duffel bag I'd bought at a surplus store. A few clothes, my documents, and a photo of my father. Nothing else was needed. In the morning, my mother followed me to the door. She stood there silently, then finally said, "You'll never be a man, Ethan. You can join the military 100 times. It won't change you. You're a weakling inside, and that's forever." I looked at her one last time. I saw a worn-out woman of 50 with bitter lines around her mouth and dull, extinguished eyes. I felt a pang of pity for her. Pity that she could never love her only son. Pity that her entire life had been spent in anger and disappointment. "Goodbye, Mom," I said quietly, and stepped out of the apartment. The drive to the mobilization center took 3 hours. The bus carried recruits from various parts of Raleigh. The guys were all different. Some laughed and joked to hide their nervousness. Others sat silently, staring out the window. I belonged to the latter group. At the center, they lined us up, counted us, and issued temporary uniforms. An officer gave us a briefing on the rules of conduct and discipline. Then they led us to the barracks, where we spent our first night. I slept poorly, snoring, talking in their sleep, the creak of beds. But I didn't complain. This was my new life, and I had to adjust. At 5 a.m. we woke up, formed ranks, exercised, ate breakfast, and underwent medical checks. Everything was strictly scheduled, no wasted words. We were divided into groups of 30. My group fell under the command of Sergeant Major Rourke, a man in his 40s with a face crisscrossed with scars. "Listen up," he said in a low voice. "You're not at a resort here. The army means hard work, discipline, and obeying orders. If you can't hack it, speak up now. We'll send you right back home to Mommy." No one stepped out of formation. "Good," Rourke continued. "You all think you're men. We'll see about that in a month." The first 2 weeks were hell. Up at 5 a.m., lights out at 11 p.m. In between were forced marches, physical training, drill practice, and memorizing regulations. Every cell in my body ached, but I endured. Many couldn't handle it. They asked to go home or faked illness. 7 guys dropped out of our group in 2 weeks. I held fast. When my legs refused to move during a ruck march, I remembered my mother's words. "You'll never be a man." And the fury gave me the strength to take 1 more step, then another, then 10 more, then another mile. Sergeant Major Rourke noticed my persistence. After one particularly grueling training session, he walked up to me. "Miller, why are you pushing so hard, trying to prove something to someone?" "Proving it to myself," I answered honestly. Rourke nodded. "That's the right answer. The main judge of a man is himself. Keep up the good work." A month later, Special Forces selection began. About 50 volunteers from our training unit showed up. We were taken to a special training ground for testing. The first test, a 30-mile ruck march with a full load. A 40-pound pack, rifle, helmet. The time limit was 4 hours. The temperature was 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Half the candidates didn't make it to the finish line. I finished with time to spare, even though my legs felt like wooden stumps. The next test, the Special Forces obstacle course. An 8-foot ditch, a 10-foot wall, a 30-foot rope climb. Barbed wire. I tackled every obstacle, not thinking about the pain, the scrapes, or my fear of heights. I thought only of the goal, making it into special forces, becoming the best, proving my mother wrong. The third test, hand-to-hand combat. The opponents were chosen randomly. I was matched with a massive guy from Wyoming, at least 40 pounds heavier than me. But my boxing experience paid off. I moved faster, hit more precisely, and used his weight against him. In 3 minutes, my opponent was on the mat. The fourth test, psychological resilience. We were called into a room one by one, where an officer psychologist asked questions, provoked us, and verbally tore us down, trying to throw us off balance. Many candidates cracked, snapped back, or showed weakness. When it was my turn, the psychologist looked at my file. Miller, Ethan, single mother, father deceased. Tell me, Miller, did you join the army because no one loved you at home? I remained silent. Do you think the army will replace your family? That you'll find acceptance here? The officer continued. Weak people always look for somewhere to hide from reality. I stared straight ahead, refusing to react. My years of humiliation had taught me how to mask pain. Silent? So it's true then, the psychologist sneered. All right, Miller, you're dismissed. I walked out of the room with a straight back. My hands were trembling from the suppressed fury, but I had managed it. I hadn't cracked. I had passed the test. The results were announced 3 days later. Out of 50 candidates, 6 were selected. I was one of them. Sergeant Major Rourke personally congratulated each of us. You passed selection, but this is only the beginning. The real test is ahead. Special Forces training is 3 times tougher than regular Army training. Get ready. We were transferred to a separate base near Fort Bragg, where the Special Forces Training Center was located. The commander of the center was Colonel Hayes, a legend of US Special Operations, a veteran of Afghanistan and the First Gulf War. During the first formation, he walked slowly around us, studying each man with his eyes. He stopped in front of me. Miller. Yes, sir, Colonel. I heard about your persistence during selection. Good work. But everyone here is good. There are no weak links. If you want to survive and become a true operator, forget your ego. Teamwork is more important than personal ambition. Understood, Colonel? Understood, sir. Training lasted 6 months. Every day was an ordeal. Firing all types of weapons, tactical drills, survival in extreme conditions, demolitions, close quarters combat, rappelling, parachute jumping, and field medical aid. I soaked up knowledge like a sponge, trained harder than anyone, slept less than anyone, and demanded maximum effort from myself. The instructors noticed, but didn't offer praise. In special operations, you aren't praised for effort. You are praised for results. My first baptism by fire came 8 months after I enlisted. Our team was deployed to the Middle East as part of a special operations company. The mission? Clear out a mountain region where insurgents were hiding. Before the flight, Colonel Hayes briefed us. War is not training. They shoot to kill out there. Each of you must understand that you might not come back, but you are going to protect your country, to protect innocent people. This is your duty. We flew out on a military transport aircraft. My stomach churned with fear and excitement. Next to me sat other young guys just starting their service. But the look in everyone's eyes was one of grim determination. In the Middle East, we were met by heat and dust. We were based in a fortified camp near a major city. The first week involved reconnaissance, patrolling the area, and verifying intelligence about the enemy's location. The first firefight occurred on the 8th day. Our 12-man team was ambushed in a narrow canyon. Insurgents opened fire from the high ground, pinning us against the rocks. Our team leader, Major Stone, made a quick decision. Split up. Half of us would provide covering fire, and the other half would flank them. I was in the covering fire group, shooting at enemy positions, watching as bullets chipped sparks off the rocks next to my head. Fear paralyzed me for a second, but then my survival instinct and training took over. My body acted automatically. Reload, aim, fire. The flanking team hit the insurgents from the side. The enemy fire weakened. Major Stone commanded the assault. We got up and moved forward, still firing. The fight ended in 10 minutes. 3 insurgents were killed, 2 were wounded and captured. On our side, 1 man was lightly wounded in the shoulder. After the battle, my hands were shaking. The adrenaline slowly faded, leaving emptiness and the realization that I had just participated in a real fight for the first time. I had killed people. Yes, they were the enemy, but they were still people. Major Stone walked up to me. "How are you, Miller?" "I'm good, Major. The first time is always tough, but you held up well. You didn't panic. You followed orders. Good work." It was the first praise I'd ever received in my life from a significant person. Not from my mother, who only humiliated me, nor from teachers who were indifferent to me, but from my commander, a combat veteran whose opinion actually mattered. Operations in the Middle East followed one after another. Clears, ambushes, raids on fortified positions, convoy security, protecting civilian infrastructure. I saw death every day, lost comrades, saw the wounded, and heard the screams and groans. 3 months into my deployment, I was no longer the 18-year-old kid who had arrived. I had aged 10 years. I learned not to show fear, to act coolly in any situation, and to make quick decisions. Colonel Hayes came to the base once a month, checking on our readiness and speaking with the troops. One day, he called me into his tent. "Miller, sit down." I sat, unsure what to expect. "Your commanders speak highly of you," the colonel began. "They say you're a reliable soldier. You don't panic, and you use your head. You have the potential to become an officer." My heart beat faster. An officer. That would mean a career path, recognition, and the ability to command men. "I'm recommending you for officer candidate school," Hayes continued. "After you finish your initial enlistment, you can enroll, complete 4 years of schooling, and return here as a second lieutenant." "Thank you, Colonel. I accept." "Then get ready. Your contract ends in 6 months. You'll be heading to OCS." But fate had other plans. 2 months later, our team received a critical assignment: a hostage rescue in a mountain village. Insurgents had seized a school, holding 30 children and 5 teachers. They demanded the release of their captured associates and a helicopter for extraction. Command refused to negotiate with the terrorists. A direct assault was approved. Our team was part of the assault force, 30 special operations soldiers in total. We surrounded the village under the cover of darkness. Snipers took positions on the high ground. The assault teams crept up to the school unnoticed. Over the radio, the operation commander gave the signal. "We start in 3 minutes. Snipers, engage the perimeter guards. Assault teams, breach simultaneously from 4 entries." The 3 minutes stretched into an eternity. I stood against the school wall, gripping my rifle, feeling my heart pound. Next to me was my partner, Scott Thompson, a guy from Boston. We had become close friends over months of service. "Ready?" he whispered. "Ready," I replied. The signal sounded. The snipers took their first shots, dropping the exterior guards. We kicked in the door and stormed inside. Corridors, classrooms, shouts, gunfire. Everything merged into chaos. The insurgents opened fire. Bullets whizzed past, shattering glass, chipping plaster from the walls. I moved forward, using door frames for cover, firing short bursts at the silhouettes of the terrorists. The hostages were being held in the gym. 2 insurgents stood at the entrance, guarding the door with their rifles. Scott threw a flashbang grenade. A blast, A bright flash, a deafening sound. We burst into the room while the enemies were disoriented. 2 precise shots. Both insurgents dropped. Inside the gym, the children and teachers lay on the floor, covering their heads. 3 more terrorists were hiding behind wrestling mats, using the hostages as a human shield. The leader yelled, "Back off, or I'll start killing children." Major Stone, leading the assault, tried to start a negotiation. "Let the kids go, and we'll let you walk away." "No," the leader screamed. "Everyone back, or I start shooting." In that second, one of the children, a boy about 10 years old, tried to run. The terrorists spun around to fire at the kid. I acted instinctively. 1 shot to the head. The insurgent fell. The 2 remaining men were momentarily stunned. That was all the time we needed. A sniper outside shot through a window and took down the second one. The third tried to grab a female teacher as a shield, but Scott was faster. 1 more shot. 1 more dead terrorist. The operation was over. All the hostages were alive. Not one was injured. On our side, 3 wounded, no fatalities. A complete success. When the adrenaline subsided, I sat against the school wall, shaking. I had just saved a child's life. That boy could have died if I hadn't fired at the right moment. The realization was overwhelming. Major Stone placed a hand on my shoulder. "Miller, you were a hero today. That shot was perfect. You saved that boy." "I just did what I had to do," I replied quietly. "That's exactly what real men do," the major said. "They do what they have to, without thinking of the consequences." After that operation, I was put in for an award, the Silver Star for Gallantry. The award ceremony was held back at the base. Colonel Hayes personally presented the medals. As he pinned the medal to my uniform, he said, "Miller, I'm proud of you. You proved you're worthy of wearing the Special Operations uniform." Those words meant more to me than the medal itself. For the first time in my life, someone had told me they were proud of me. My service continued. 6 more months of operations, patrols, and battles. I participated in 12 combat engagements, received a minor wound in my leg from grenade shrapnel, but remained in the fight. My comrades called me Iron Ethan for my endurance and composure. When my initial service commitment ended, Colonel Hayes called me in again. "Miller, your contract is up in a week. You have 2 options. Go to officer candidate school or re-enlist and stay here. What's your choice?" I thought about it for several days. OCS meant a stable future, an officer's career and the possibility of achieving higher ranks. But re-enlisting meant staying with the men who had become my brothers, continuing to do essential work. "I'll re-enlist, Colonel," I decided. "I want to stay here." Hayes nodded with understanding. "Good choice. We need soldiers like you." I signed a contract for 3 years. The pay for a contract soldier was much higher than that of an initial enlistee. I started saving money, having financial independence for the first time in my life. I didn't think about my mother. I didn't call or write. She hadn't shown any interest in me, and I didn't show any interest in her. The connection was severed the day I left home. A year into my contract, I was promoted to sergeant and made a team leader. I had 8 soldiers under my command. It was an enormous responsibility. Their lives depended on my decisions. My first operation as a team leader was successful. We seized a weapons cache the insurgents were using for resupply. Not one of my soldiers was hurt. It was the best feeling in the world, bringing my men home alive. But things didn't always go smoothly. 3 months later, our team was caught in a serious engagement. We were patrolling a mountain road when we ran into an ambush. There were about 20 insurgents, and they held the dominant high ground. We were pinned against the rock face. There was no escape. I called for backup over the radio, but it would take 30 minutes to arrive. We had to hold out. Ammunition was running low. One of my soldiers, Alex Morales, was shot in the leg. The bleeding was heavy. I bandaged the wound under fire, trying not to think that a bullet could hit me at any second. "Commander, we can't hold them off," said Scott Thompson, my second in command. "There are too many of them." "We will hold," I replied firmly. "No one dies today. You hear that, men? No one dies." My words gave them strength. We continued to return fire, conserving rounds, shooting only at visible targets. Every bullet had to count. The insurgents tried a frontal assault, hoping to overwhelm us by sheer numbers. That was their mistake. We met them with heavy fire, dropped 5 of them, and the rest pulled back. Finally, backup arrived. A gunship provided air support, strafing the insurgents' positions with rockets. The ambush was destroyed. We survived. That day, I understood what it meant to be a commander. It wasn't just about giving orders. It was about taking responsibility for the lives of the men who trusted you. It was about being ready to sacrifice yourself for them. After that fight, Major Stone told me, "Miller, you've become a true leader. Your men are ready to follow you through hell. That's worth more than anything." The service continued year after year. Operations, fights, losses, victories. I matured, grew tougher mentally, and became a professional at my job. I was promoted to Staff Sergeant, then Sergeant First Class. By age 25, I was an experienced Special Operations soldier with 7 years of service. I had participated in 50 combat operations, had 3 wounds, and 4 medals. Colonel Hayes again suggested I apply to OCS. "Ethan," he said, addressing me with fatherly warmth, "you've grown into an excellent soldier, but you can become a great officer, a company commander, a battalion commander. You have a talent for command. Don't waste it." This time, I agreed. I realized I couldn't grow further as a sergeant. I needed an education and officer bars. The colonel arranged for my admission to the U.S. Army Special Warfare Center and school without needing the usual entrance exams, using a special quota for those distinguished in combat. I left the Middle East for Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My studies came easily. After 7 years of real war, the theoretical knowledge seemed simple. I graduated with honors, was the class leader, and a role model for the younger cadets. But the most important event happened during my second year of OCLs. A commission from the Pentagon came to the school to award medals to distinguished cadets. Among the delegation was General Vance, Deputy Commander of Special Operations Command. After the ceremony, the general asked me to stay behind. "Staff Sergeant Miller, I've reviewed your file. Impressive service record, especially the hostage rescue operation. That shot you took to save the child, it was world-class sniper work." "Thank you, General." "Tell me, would you be interested in specializing as a sniper?" the general asked. I thought about it. A sniper is a unique profession in special operations. A lone wolf, operating covertly, eliminating targets from a distance, often working in a pair or completely alone. It demands iron nerves, patience, absolute accuracy. "I would, General," I replied. "Then, after you graduate, I will assign you to the sniper course. 6 months of intensive training, and you'll become a special operations sniper." This was a turning point in my career. I graduated from OCS with distinction, received the rank of second lieutenant, and then left for the sniper course. The training was brutal, shooting at different ranges, in various weather conditions, at moving targets under stress, studying ballistics, bullet aerodynamics, the effect of wind and temperature. We were taught not just to shoot, but to think like a sniper, calculating the bullet's trajectory mentally, accounting for dozens of variables, and making a decision in a fraction of a second. Out of 30 students, 18 graduated. I was the top shot in the class. My shooting accuracy was 98% hits at distances up to 1,000 yards. I was sent back to the Middle East, but now as a sniper officer. I received my first assignment a week after arriving. The liquidation of a high-value commander, Jamal al-Qasim, who was planning a major attack. I went on the mission with my spotter, a young lieutenant named Sam Riley. We took a position on the roof of an abandoned building, overlooking the house where al-Qasim was hiding. We waited 3 days, watching through the scope, studying the security routine and the movement in the courtyard. On the 4th day, the target appeared. Al-Qasim stepped onto a second-floor balcony and lit a cigarette. The distance was 600 yards. The wind was light, coming from the side, right to left. Correction for 2 clicks. I aimed, leveled my breathing, and put my finger on the trigger. Exhale, pause, fire. The bullet traveled exactly 600 yards in 1.2 seconds. It hit the target precisely. Al-Qasim fell. Mission accomplished. We left our position through a back exit before the terrorists' guards even realized what had happened. An hour later, we were back at the base, reporting mission success to our commander. "Excellent work, Miller," said Major Stone, who now commanded our company. "1 shot, 1 target. That's top tier." That's how my sniper career began. Mission after mission, target after target. I eliminated commanders, enemy snipers, and terrorists planning attacks. Every shot saved the lives of innocent people, but this job had its psychological cost. Killing from a distance through an optical sight, seeing the face of the man you're about to shoot, it's difficult, even if it's the enemy. I started having trouble sleeping. I saw the faces of the dead in my dreams. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. The unit psychologist said it was a normal reaction, that it would pass with time, but it didn't. After 2 years as a sniper, I had 37 confirmed kills. I remembered every detail of each one: the location, the time, the distance, the weather conditions. At 29, I was promoted to first lieutenant and appointed commander of a sniper element. I had 6 snipers and 6 spotters under my command. We worked as a single, synchronized unit, providing cover for assault teams, eliminating high-value targets, and conducting reconnaissance. One day, our team received an assignment of special importance. The Shadow, the top terrorist on the federal most wanted list, the organizer of countless attacks, was hiding in the mountains. Intelligence had pinpointed his location. The order was to eliminate him. The operation was planned meticulously. We studied the terrain, plotted routes, and selected positions. The Shadow was cautious, rarely showing himself in the open, always surrounded by guards. We took a position on a mountain opposite his hideout. Distance, 900 yards. We waited a week, watching through optics, taking pictures, sending data back to headquarters, but no shot presented itself. The target wouldn't appear. On the 8th day, the Shadow emerged from the house. He walked quickly, surrounded by 4 bodyguards. The window for a shot was 3 seconds. I aimed, accounted for the wind, the distance, the target's movement. Fire. Miss. The bullet passed inches from the Shadow's head, hitting the wall behind him. The guards immediately surrounded him and rushed him back inside. I had missed. For the first time in 2 years as a sniper, I had missed a truly critical target. It was a blow to my professional pride. "Not your fault, Ethan," my spotter said. "The distance was too great. The target was moving fast. You did everything right." But I blamed myself. Could I have shot slightly sooner? Did I calculate the lead correctly? These questions tormented me for weeks. The Shadow was eliminated later by another sniper. He did what I could not. But the lingering sense of failure remained. The understanding that I wasn't perfect, that I could make mistakes. It proved beneficial. I became more cautious, prepared more thoroughly for every operation, double and triple checking my calculations. There were no more misses. At age 30, I received another promotion. Captain Miller, commander of the sniper platoon. 24 snipers under my command. It was a lot of responsibility, but I handled it. General Hayes, who had by now become a general himself and commanded all special operations in the Southern Command, called me to his office in San Antonio, Texas. "Ethan Andrew," he addressed me officially. "I've been following your career all these years. You've risen from private to captain, from a basic soldier to a platoon commander. You have proven your courage, professionalism, and dedication to your country. Thank you, General. That's why I'm recommending you for the highest award, the Medal of Honor." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The Medal of Honor, the highest military distinction, the dream of every soldier. "General, I'm not worthy of such an honor," I said, stunned. "You are worthy," the general replied firmly. "You saved dozens of lives through your actions, participated in critically important operations, and showed bravery and self-sacrifice. That deserves recognition." The award ceremony was scheduled for 2 months later. It would be held at the White House. The president himself would present the award. I had 2 months to prepare. More importantly, I had 2 months to decide whether to invite my mother to the ceremony. I hadn't spoken to her in 12 years. I hadn't called or written. I only knew she was alive because the Pentagon had confirmed her details for the award application. Part of me wanted her to see what I had become, to realize how wrong she was when she said I would never be a man. The other part said, "Why bother? Her opinion no longer matters. I proved I'm a man to myself. That's enough." I called Coach Frank, my old boxing trainer. He was still working at the community gym, training young people. "Ethan," he exclaimed, delighted to hear my voice. "Where have you been? I heard you were in the army, but I didn't know the details." I told him briefly about my service and the upcoming award ceremony. "I'm proud of you, kid," Coach Frank said, warmth in his voice. "I always knew you'd make something of yourself. Does your mother know about your success?" "No, we don't talk." "Maybe you should call her. She's still your mother, no matter what." "I don't know. She caused me a lot of pain." "I get it. But you're a strong man now. Her words can't hurt you anymore. Maybe give her a chance to see what you've become." I thought about his words for several days. In the end, I decided to call my mother. She didn't answer right away. Her voice was old, tired. "Hello?" "Mom, it's me, Ethan." A long pause. "Ethan? My son? Is that really you? Where have you been all these years?" "Serving in the army, special operations. I'm a captain now." Another pause. "A captain? You made it to officer?" "Yes, and I'm being awarded the Medal of Honor. The ceremony is in 2 months in Washington. I want to invite you." I heard her gasp. "The Medal of Honor? You?" "Yes, I'm the Ethan who, in your words, would never become a man." My phrase came out sharply, with a resentment I couldn't conceal. "Ethan, Her voice was trembling. "I didn't know. Forgive me. No need for apologies. Just tell me if you'll come to the ceremony." "I'll come. Of course I'll come." I gave her the date and time, telling her I would send train tickets and book a hotel. The conversation ended. I hung up the phone and felt a strange emptiness. The next 2 months were hectic. I had to prepare for the ceremony, get my dress uniform tailored, and rehearse the protocol. But inside, the anxiety grew. How would the meeting with my mother go? The day of the ceremony arrived. I flew to Washington the day before the award and met my mother at the train station. She had aged, her posture was stooped, and her hair was completely gray. She looked every bit of her 62 years. When she saw me in my military uniform with captain's bars, and medals on my chest, her eyes filled with tears. "Son," she whispered, "look how you've grown. How brave you look." We hugged awkwardly after 12 years of separation. I took her to the hotel and helped her settle in. We agreed to meet for dinner later that evening. Over dinner, my mother asked about my service, my life, and where I had been all these years. I answered in general terms, without details. I didn't want to frighten her with stories of the war. "Ethan, I need to tell you something," she began as dinner was ending. "I've lived with guilt all these years. The way I treated you was wrong. I was a cruel mother." I remained silent, letting her speak. "When your father died, I was left alone. I was terrified. I didn't know how to raise a child. I blamed you for not being like him. But it was unfair. You were a child. I was the adult. I should have loved you, supported you. Instead," she couldn't finish, and she started to cry. I handed her a napkin. "Mom, you can't change the past, but I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago." "Truly?" She looked at me through her tears. "Truly. Anger and resentment eat you alive. I learned to let go." The next day was the ceremony. The East Room of the White House. A solemn atmosphere, a military band, high-ranking officers, government officials. My mother sat in the audience among the other recipients' relatives. I saw her from behind the curtains. She was sitting straight, wearing the best dress she owned, looking dignified. The president presented the awards personally to each person. When my turn came, the citation was read aloud. "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, while performing special operations to neutralize terrorists and save innocent lives, the Medal of Honor is hereby awarded to Captain Ethan Andrew Miller." The president pinned the gold star to my dress uniform jacket and shook my hand. "Thank you for your service, Captain. America is proud of officers like you." "I serve the United States," I replied, according to protocol. When the ceremony ended, I went down to the hall. My mother stood among the people, looking at me with eyes full of the pride and love I had never seen in them before. She walked up and hugged me tightly. "Forgive me, Ethan, dear. Forgive me for everything." "It's okay, Mom. It's all in the past." After the ceremony was a reception. General Hayes, other senior officers, and comrades congratulated me. My mother stayed nearby, listening to what they said about me. Best sniper, reliable commander, a true hero. That evening, we sat in the hotel room, drinking tea. My mother looked at the gold star lying in its velvet box on the table. "You proved me wrong," she said softly. "You became a true man, better than I could have ever dreamed." "I didn't do this to prove anything to you," I replied honestly. "I did it for myself, to prove it to myself." "I know. And that makes your achievement even greater." The next day, I took my mother to the train for her trip back to Raleigh. We agreed to keep in touch, calling once a week. I promised to visit during my leave. "Be careful, son," she said as we parted. "Take care of yourself." "I'll try, Mom." The train started to move. My mother waved from the window. I stood on the platform until the car disappeared from view. Returning to my unit, I continued my service with a new sense of inner calm. Reconciling with my mother closed an old wound that had festered for years. I no longer needed her approval, but receiving it was still gratifying. The Medal of Honor changed my position in the army. Now, I was known not just within my unit, but throughout the entire command. Young officers asked for my advice. Generals listened to my opinion in meetings, but the main thing hadn't changed. I was still a soldier. Every morning, wake up at 6 o'clock. Training, instruction with my subordinates, preparation for operations. The awards and ranks didn't exempt me from the daily grind. General Hayes offered me a staff position at command headquarters, an office, a stable schedule, paperwork. Many officers dreamed of such an assignment, but not me. General, with your permission, I'd like to remain in the line unit, I said at our meeting. My place is with the troops, not behind a desk. The general smiled. I figured you'd refuse. All right, Miller, but remember, sooner or later, you'll have to accept a promotion. A talented officer shouldn't get stuck in one place. I understand, General. When the time comes, I'll be ready. The time came sooner than I expected. 6 months after the award, the commander of our brigade, Lieutenant Colonel Baker, was killed in action. An ambush, a sudden attack, unequal forces. He was covering the retreat of his men and was mortally wounded. The funeral was solemn. A military band, a color guard, a rifle volley. I stood in formation and watched the casket draped with the flag. Lieutenant Colonel Baker was a good commander, fair and brave. His loss was a blow to the entire brigade. After the funeral, General Hayes called me in. Miller, the brigade needs a new commander. I want to appoint you. I was stunned. A brigade commander is typically a lieutenant colonel or colonel, and I was only a captain. To skip 2 ranks was almost unprecedented. General, I don't have enough experience commanding large units. But you have combat experience, the respect of the troops, and a natural talent for leadership, the general countered. You'll learn what you don't know as you go. I believe in you. If you are sure, General, I will accept the appointment. I am sure. I'll sign the order tomorrow. You'll be promoted to Major next month, and Lieutenant Colonel a year after that, provided you show results. And just like that, I became a brigade commander in special operations at age 31, the youngest brigade commander in the modern history of US special operations. I had 350 soldiers under my command. The first few months were difficult. Many officers, older and higher ranking than me, were skeptical of the appointment. I had to prove that I was worthy of the position. I didn't rely on the authority of my rank. I worked harder than anyone else, was at every training session, personally checked the readiness of units for operations, and set a personal example in everything. The first major operation under my command happened 2 months later. Reconnaissance had located an insurgent base in the mountains, where a large-scale terrorist plot was being prepared. The order was to clear the base and capture the leader. I planned the operation down to the smallest detail. 3 assault teams, sniper coverage, a blocking force, and a reserve. We rehearsed the actions on a scale model, checked communications, and distributed ammunition. The operation began at 3:00 a.m. Snipers silently took out the sentries. The assault teams entered the base simultaneously from 3 directions. The insurgents were caught completely by surprise. The fight lasted 20 minutes. 17 terrorists were killed. 5 were captured alive, including the leader. On our side, 2 wounded, no fatalities. The operation went by the book. When we returned to base, the officers looked at me with respect. I had proven I could command. The doubts were gone. General Hayes personally congratulated me. Excellent work, Ethan. Keep it up. Days turned into months, months into years. I grew as a commander, gained experience, and learned to manage people not just in combat, but in regular service. I understood that a commander must care for his soldiers, their well-being, their health, their families. I organized a gym, a library, and a recreation room on base. I secured increased pay for contract soldiers and helped the families of fallen and wounded troops. People saw that their commander cared, and they repaid it with loyalty. At 32, I was promoted to major. At 33, I was a lieutenant colonel. My career developed rapidly, but I never lost touch with reality. I remembered where I came from. My mother called every week, asking about my health and my service, and telling me about life back in Raleigh. Our relationship became warm, almost normal. The past wasn't forgotten, but it was no longer a barrier. One day, I visited her at her house during my leave. The apartment hadn't changed. The same old wallpaper, the creaking hardwood floor, the smell of her favorite soup in the kitchen. But the atmosphere was different. My mother met me with a smile, hugged me, and sat me down at the table. "How are you doing, Mom?" I asked, looking at her aged face. "I'm fine, son. My social security is small, but it's enough. The neighbors help out, and most importantly, you're alive and well. That's all that matters." We talked until late at night about the past, the present, and the future. She admitted that she was prouder of me than anyone in the world, that she told her neighbors about her hero son, and that she prayed every day for my safety. "Ethan, have you forgiven me?" she asked before I went to sleep. "I forgave you a long time ago, Mom. And I forgave myself too for holding on to the resentment." She cried, quietly, helplessly, like an old woman. I hugged her, just as I had longed to hug my father, whose picture I always carried with me. "It's okay, Mom. We both made mistakes, but we found our way back to each other." The next day, I took her to the cemetery to visit my father's grave. I hadn't been there in a long time. The marker was darkened with age. The paint on the letters was peeling. I cleaned the stone, repainted the inscription, and planted flowers. "He would have been proud of you," my mother said, standing next to the grave. "Your father was just as brave, strong, and honest." I tried to be worthy of his memory. We stood in silence. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees. A bird sang somewhere in the distance. It was quiet and peaceful. Returning from leave, I plunged into work with renewed energy. The brigade participated in dozens of operations. We thwarted terrorist plots, captured high-value criminals, and guarded critical infrastructure. My reputation grew. General Hayes promoted me, giving me increasingly important assignments. At 35, I was promoted to colonel and given the position of deputy commander of the Special Operations Command. Now, I was responsible not just for one brigade, but for several. I coordinated the actions of different units, planned large-scale operations, and worked with the command staff. Desk work was inevitable in this position, but I tried to visit the units as often as possible, talk to the soldiers, and participate in training exercises. I didn't want to become a pencil pusher in uniform. One day, General Hayes invited me to dinner at his home. His wife prepared an excellent meal. We talked about service, life, and future plans. "Ethan, you've become like a son to me," the general said after dinner. "I've watched you for 15 years. I saw you grow from a boy into a true commander. I'm proud of you." "Thank you, General. You've been more than a boss. You've been a teacher and a mentor." "I'll be retiring soon," the general continued. "I'm 62. It's time to hand the reins to the younger generation. I'm recommending you for my position." I was stunned. Commander of the Special Operations Command. A Major General. The highest position an officer in Special Operations could dream of. "I'm not experienced enough for that position," I tried to argue. "You are experienced enough. You have 15 years of combat experience, an impeccable reputation, and the Medal of Honor. You've earned this position. If you believe so, General, I will accept it." General Hayes retired 6 months later. The farewell was formal. The entire brigade lined up on the parade field. The band played a march. The general walked the ranks, saying goodbye to each unit for the last time. When he reached me, he hugged me tightly. "Take care of the men, Ethan. They are your responsibility now." "I won't let you down, General." The order for my appointment was signed the next day. Colonel Ethan Andrew Miller is appointed commander of the Special Operations Forces of the Southern Command, with the rank of Major General. At 36, I became a general, the youngest general in the modern history of the US Army. It was a triumph I couldn't have dreamed of 20 years ago when I left home under my mother's curses. The change of command ceremony was held at command headquarters. I took the oath, received the unit's colors, and listened to the congratulations. My mother came to the ceremony. I insisted on it. I wanted her to see the final culmination of my journey. She sat in the front row in the auditorium, wearing a new dress I had bought especially for the occasion. When the ceremony ended, my mother walked up to me, looked at the general's stars on my shoulders, and cried tears of joy. "My son is a general," she whispered. "My little Ethan is a general." "Not so little anymore, Mom," I smiled. "I'm 36. To a mother, you'll always be little." We took a photo together. Me in my dress uniform, her standing proudly next to me. That photo became my favorite. I hung it in my office in a prominent place. The work of a general was fundamentally different from the work of a soldier or even a brigade commander. Now, I was responsible for several thousand servicemen, coordinating dozens of operations simultaneously, communicating with the highest levels of command, and making strategic decisions. The first few months were very stressful. I learned to manage people not directly, but through subordinate commanders. This required different skills: the ability to delegate, control from a distance, and trust. But the experience I had gained over the years helped. I knew special operations from the inside. I understood the soldiers' problems and could anticipate difficulties in operations. This gave me an advantage over other generals who had risen through the ranks in staff positions. A year into the new position, I received an assignment of special national importance. A series of terrorist attacks had begun in a volatile region. Insurgents were bombing schools, hospitals, and government buildings. Dozens of innocent people had been killed. The Secretary of Defense personally called me. "General Miller, the situation is critical. We need to stop these terrorists at any cost. I am giving you carte blanche for all necessary actions." "Understood, Secretary. We will complete the mission." I assembled the operations staff and studied all available intelligence on the attacks. Analysts found a pattern. All the attacks occurred within a 60-mile radius of a specific mountain area. The insurgent base was likely located there. I developed an operational plan. 3 special operations brigades would blockade the area. Aviation would conduct precision strikes on fortifications. Assault teams would clear the territory. The scale was unprecedented for a typical counter-terrorism operation, but there was no other way. The Secretary approved the plan. The operation was scheduled for 1 week later. I personally went to the region to lead the operation. The base was in the mountains, in rugged, inaccessible terrain. The insurgents were dug into caves, had created fortifications, and mined the approaches. A frontal assault would result in enormous losses. I decided to proceed slowly, methodically. First, we blocked all exits from the area, then aviation struck known strongholds. After that, assault teams began clearing the caves, one after another. The operation lasted 2 weeks. Heavy fighting, losses on both sides. I didn't sleep for 3 days at a stretch, coordinating the unit's actions, making decisions, and encouraging the commanders. On the 12th day of the operation, my old friend, Major Scott Thompson, was killed. The same Scott with whom I had stormed the school to save the hostages 20 years ago. His team hit a tripwire. The explosion and shrapnel killed him instantly. When I was informed of Scott's death, for the first time in years, I felt myself losing control of my emotions. I clenched my fists until they hurt, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. You can't show weakness. A general must always be strong. "Continue the operation," I said firmly. Scott wouldn't forgive us if we retreated. On the 14th day, the base was fully cleared. 73 terrorists were killed and 15 were captured alive. We found caches of weapons, documents, and plans for future attacks. The operation was successfully concluded, but the price was high. 14 of our soldiers died. 37 were wounded. I took every loss personally. These were my men, my responsibility. The Secretary of Defense congratulated me on the successful conclusion of the operation. The President issued a commendation to all personnel involved. I was recommended for the Legion of Merit. But medals can't replace the dead. I attended the funeral of every soldier who fell in that operation. I met with their families, offered my condolences, and promised support. Scott's wife met me at the door. Her eyes were red from tears, her face drawn. 2 children, a girl and a boy, hid behind her skirt. "General Miller," she said quietly. "Scott always said you were the best commander, that he'd follow you anywhere." "I'm so sorry, Anna," I said. "Scott was like a brother to me." "I know." He said the same. I promised to help with housing, with the children's education, with any problems they had. The government pays a pension to the families of fallen servicemen, but it's not enough. I personally ensured that Scott's family lacked nothing. Returning to headquarters, I sat in my office alone for a long time, looking at the photographs on the wall. Young me at the first training session with Coach Frank, my enlistment oath, my first medal, my comrades, many of them no longer alive. War takes its toll. It doesn't matter how experienced or cautious you are. Death comes unexpectedly. Today you're alive. Tomorrow you're not. Every soldier knows this. I took a bottle of bourbon from the cabinet, poured a shot. I never drank on duty, but today was an exception. I raised the glass. To you, Scott. To all who didn't come back. I drank it down. The bourbon burned my throat, and warmth spread through my chest. I poured a second. To Dad, whom I never knew. A third, to Coach Frank, who died 3 years ago from a heart attack. A fourth, to all our fallen comrades. I woke up the next morning with a heavy head but a clear mind. The war continues. A general cannot afford weakness. I had to keep going. The following years were intense. Terrorism did not abate. The constant presence of special operations in hotspots was required. I commanded, planned, and controlled. Operations followed one after another. At 39, I was promoted to Lieutenant General. At 40, the Distinguished Service Medal. At 41, Deputy Commander of the U.S. Special Operations Command. I moved to Washington, D.C. to the main Pentagon staff. Work in the capital was fundamentally different from work in the command. Here, issues of national significance were decided, operations were coordinated with other agencies, and the strategy for the development of special operations was determined. I participated in meetings with the President, with cabinet secretaries, and with the heads of intelligence agencies. My opinion now influenced decisions at the highest level. But I didn't forget where I came from. Every month, I traveled to the units and talked to the soldiers, checking on their readiness. It was important not to lose touch with reality, not to become a potted plant general. My mother moved to DC to be near me. She could no longer live alone back in Raleigh. Her health had deteriorated. She needed constant care. I rented her an apartment near mine, hired a caregiver, and visited her every weekend. We sat in the kitchen, drank tea, and talked. She spoke about the past, about what life was like before the war, before the upheaval of the 90s. I listened, understanding that these moments were priceless. "Ethan, are you happy?" she asked me one day. I thought about it. "I don't know, Mom. I have a career, recognition, awards, but I don't have a family, no children. My whole life has been the army." "It's not too late to start a family," she said gently. "You're still young, 41. That's not old." What woman would agree to a life with a military man? Constant deployments, danger, uncertainty. That's no life for a family. You'll find someone who understands and accepts it. Don't give up on your personal happiness for the sake of service. Her words made me think. I had indeed devoted myself entirely to the army. There had been no time for a personal life, for romance, for starting a family. A few brief relationships in 20 years of service. That was all. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe it was time to think about myself. Fate answered that question a month later. At an official reception, I met Dr. Leah Kincaid, a surgeon at a military hospital. She was 35. She had worked in Afghanistan and Iraq, saving wounded soldiers. We started talking by chance while standing near the buffet table. She spoke about her work, how difficult it was to lose patients, and how joyous it was to save lives. You understand what that's like, don't you? She asked, looking me in the eye. Bearing the responsibility for people's lives. I do, I answered honestly. I commanded in combat zones. I know what it means to lose a soldier. We talked all evening. We turned out to have a lot in common. Both of us had dedicated our lives to service. Both knew the price of war, and both understood each other without unnecessary words. I asked for her phone number. She smiled as she gave it to me. Call me, General. I'd be happy to hear from you. I called the next day and invited her to dinner. She accepted. We met at a quiet restaurant in downtown DC. The conversation was easy and natural. Leah talked about her family, her childhood in New England, and her decision to become a doctor. I spoke about my journey, omitting the difficult details. You've had a difficult life, she said at the end of the evening. But you managed it. You became the man you wanted to be. Not without losses, I replied. The price was high. Any achievement has a price. The main thing is that it wasn't too high. We started meeting once a week, then twice, then every free evening. Leah understood my work. She didn't demand constant attention and wasn't upset by sudden trips. 6 months later, I proposed. We were sitting by the Potomac River at sunset. Leah, I'm not a romantic. I don't know how to use pretty words, but I want you by my side forever. Marry me. She smiled. That was the most honest proposal I've ever heard. Yes, Ethan. I'll marry you. The wedding was small. Close friends, comrades in service, and my mother. General Hayes flew in from Texas, specially for the wedding. He had aged, but was still lively. Finally, Ethan, he said, hugging me. I thought you'd stay a bachelor forever. I found the one who understood me, I replied, looking at Leah. My mother wept with joy. I waited for this. I waited for grandchildren. Don't rush, Mom, I laughed. Everything in its time. But time came quickly. A year later, Leah was pregnant. We awaited the child with excitement and joy. Labor began in the middle of the night. I rushed Leah to the hospital at breakneck speed, breaking every traffic law. We made it. The doctors took her into the delivery room. I stayed in the corridor to wait. I waited for 3 hours. I paced back and forth, smoked by the window, and prayed. I had never prayed before, but now I begged God for help. Finally, the door opened. The doctor came out smiling. Congratulations, General. You have a son. Mom and the baby are doing great. I went into the room. Leah lay on the bed, pale, exhausted, but happy. In her arms, she held a tiny bundle in a white blanket. I walked over and looked at my son. A small, red face, closed eyes, tiny fists. He looks like you, Leah whispered. I took my son in my arms. It was the first time in my life I'd held an infant. He was so small, so defenseless. A wave of incredible tenderness mixed with fear rose inside me. This little one was now my responsibility. I had to protect him, raise him, and give him what I hadn't had: love and support. What should we name him? Leah asked. I didn't hesitate. Andrew, after my father. Andrew Michael Miller, she pronounced. A good name. My mother arrived at the hospital an hour later. Seeing her grandson, she cried. My God, what a beautiful boy. He's the spitting image of his grandfather. She took Andrew in her arms and held him to her chest. Hello, my little sunshine. I'm your grandmother. Looking at my mother with her grandson, I realized the circle was complete. 3 generations of Millers. The father I barely remembered, me who had walked through fire and water, and the son who had his own path to find. I vowed to myself that Andrew would grow up in love, that I would never say the words my mother said to me, and that he would know his father was proud of him, no matter what path he chose. The first few months of fatherhood were difficult. Sleepless nights, crying, feeding, diaper changes. But I didn't complain. This was a new mission, no less important than military service. Leah was a wonderful mother, patient, caring, gentle. We shared the responsibilities equally. When I was home, I changed diapers, rocked my son, and walked with the stroller. My comrades were surprised to see me pushing a stroller in the park. A lieutenant general, commander of special operations, rocking a baby. But I didn't care what others thought. Family was more important than rank or title. Andrew grew fast. His first smile, his first word, his first steps. Every moment was a miracle. I photographed everything, recorded videos. I didn't want to miss a second. When Andrew turned 2, Leah was pregnant again. This time, we had a daughter. We named her Anna, after Leah's mother. Now we had 2 children. Our home was filled with laughter, shouts, and toys. I came home from work exhausted, but as soon as I saw the children, my fatigue vanished. They ran to me shouting, "Daddy!" They hugged me and demanded attention. My mother moved in with us, helping with the children, cooking and cleaning. She blossomed in the role of grandmother. Finally, she had the chance to give her grandchildren the love she couldn't give me. You know, Ethan, she said one evening when we were sitting in the kitchen late, I thought I'd never be happy, that my life was wasted. But now, looking at you, at your family, at these beautiful children, I realize I got a second chance. We all got a second chance, Mom. The work continued. I commanded special operations, planned missions, and traveled on assignments. But now, I had a reason to come home. My family gave me strength and filled every day with meaning. At 45, I was appointed commander of the United States Special Operations Command. General, the highest rank in special operations. The peak of a career I hadn't even dared to dream of in my wildest fantasies. The appointment ceremony was held at the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense personally presented the stars. General Miller, you have gone from private to commander. This is a rare example in the modern army. I wish you success in your new post. I served the United States Secretary. My family was at the ceremony. Leah, Andrew, Anna, and my mother. The children watched their father with wide eyes. Andrew was 4 now. He was beginning to understand that Dad did something important. Dad, are you the most important soldier now? He asked after the ceremony. I laughed. Not exactly the most important, but one of the most important. When I grow up, I'll be just like you. I knelt down and looked my son in the eyes. Andrew, you'll become whatever you want. A soldier, a doctor, a teacher, an engineer. The main thing is to be an honest person and do what you think is right. Like me? Like I try to be? Leah smiled, listening to our conversation. That evening, after the children were asleep, we sat on the balcony, drinking tea. You're a good father, she said. I'm proud of you. I'm just giving the children what I didn't have. Love, support, and belief in themselves. That's why you're a good father. You know the value of those things. The following years were calm. as calm as the life of a special operations commander could be. Attacks happened less frequently, operations were more successful, and losses were reduced. I implemented new training methods, purchased modern equipment, and increased the professionalism of the soldiers. Andrew started school, did well, played sports, and had many friends. Anna grew up to be a quick-witted and curious girl. She wanted to know everything, try everything. I tried to spend as much time as possible with the children. On weekends, we went hiking. In the winter, we skied. In the summer, we went to the beach. A normal family life, the kind millions of people dream of. My mother lived to be 75. She died peacefully in her sleep, without pain. We buried her next to my father in the Raleigh cemetery. I gave a speech at the funeral, talking about her difficult life and how we found our way back to each other. She was a complicated woman, I said, standing by the casket. Life made her harsh. But in the end, she found happiness, she found love. That's what matters. After the funeral, I sat by her grave alone for a long time. I remembered my childhood, her shouts, the humiliation. I remembered her saying, "You'll never be a man." "I became one, Mom," I whispered. "I became who I wanted to be. Not for you, not in spite of you, but for myself. And in the end, you acknowledged it. Thank you for that." The wind rustled the leaves. The sun was setting below the horizon. It was quiet and peaceful. I stood up, brushed the dust from my trousers, and looked at the grave one last time. Goodbye, Mom. Rest in peace. Returning to DC, I threw myself into my work. It was the best medicine for grief. Operations, meetings, reports, planning. Life went on. Andrew grew up. At 14, he was almost as tall as me. He boxed, just as I had at his age. But unlike me, he did it not out of desperation, but out of his own desire. "Dad, is it true that you killed people?" He asked me directly one day. I didn't lie. It is true. In war, you have to kill enemies to protect innocent people. It's hard. Very hard. Even if they are the enemy, killing always leaves a mark on your soul. But sometimes, it is necessary. "I want to join the army, like you," Andrew said resolutely. I looked at my son and saw the same determination in his eyes that had been in mine 30 years ago. "Andrew, the army isn't a romance. It's hard work, danger, and loss. You have to understand that." "I do, but I want to defend my country, like you." Leah was against it. "Ethan, you went through the war. Do you really want the same for your son?" "I don't want it," I replied honestly. "But it's his choice. I won't force him, but I won't stop him either." Andrew graduated high school with honors and enrolled in a military academy. I saw him off, just as my mother had seen me off 30 years ago. But my words were different. "Son, I'm proud of you, no matter what you do, no matter who you become. Remember, you can always come home. We will always be waiting for you, and we will always love you." Andrew hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Dad. I'll try to be worthy of you." Be worthy of yourself. That's what matters most. 5 years passed. Andrew is serving in special operations, a lieutenant, a platoon leader. He followed in my footsteps. I'm proud of him, but every day I pray that he returns safely from every operation. Anna is studying to be a doctor, like her mother. She wants to help people. She has a kind heart and a strong character. I'm 50 years old. Lieutenant General, Commander of Special Operations, Medal of Honor recipient. I reached heights I never dreamed of. I traveled the path from a humiliated boy to one of the most respected military leaders in the country. But the most significant achievement isn't the titles or the awards. The most important thing is that I became a person, A man, a husband, a father. I broke the cycle of abuse my mother created. I gave my children love and support. Sometimes in the evening, I sit in my office looking at the photographs on the wall. Young me at my first training session, my oath, my first medal, the Medal of Honor Gold Star, my wedding, the birth of my children. My whole life is in those pictures. And I think, what if my mother hadn't said those terrible words? Would I have become who I am? Would I have joined the military, reached these heights? I don't know. Perhaps her cruelty became the fuel for my growth. Perhaps I should be grateful for that pain. It tempered me, made me stronger. But I would never want my children to go through the same thing. I want them to grow up in love, in safety, and in the certainty that their parents are always there for them. The phone rings. Andrew's number lights up. I pick up. Hey, Dad. The operation was successful. Everyone's okay. I sigh with relief. Good job, son. I'm proud of you. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. Were you ever scared? I smile. Every single time, Andrew. Every operation. Fear is normal. The main thing is not to let it control you. Understood? Understood. Thank you. Take care of yourself, son. I will. I love you, Dad. I love you too. I hang up the phone. I look at the photograph with Andrew. He's in uniform. I'm next to him, my arm around his shoulder. 2 generations of soldiers. But between us is love, not hatred. Support, not humiliation. I became a man not because I proved it to someone, but because I learned to love, to forgive, and to be strong, not just in body, but in spirit. My mother was wrong. I became a man, a true man, and that is my victory.